Good evening, everyone. I'm John OLoughlin. Welcome to my channel. It's called Macduff Lives, and tonight we are reading another section of Cassidy's Run by David Rice. The full name is The Secret Spy War Over Nerve Gas. Cassidy's Run by David Wise. And oops, I feel a sneeze coming on. Excuse me. Yeah, and thanks again to Aaron for producing tonight, and to everybody at Neighborhood News. I'm not quite sure what their current name is, having gotten booted off of Neighborhood News Studios channel. They got terminated by YouTube, so they've got a new name now. I can't see it anywhere, Aaron, but that's where Aaron and Andy and George Webb have parked right now. You can also find them at Research Revival on YouTube. I say this because another massive YouTube termination happened last night during my show, and the upshot of it is that Club Osprey is gone, and Neighborhood News Studio has also been taken down. So, all right, so. But everyone's in good spirits, and tonight, Cassidy's Run. I have to thank George Webb for, reading the book, for advising me, to read it on the show. It took me a little while to get used to the idea, and I'm not quite sure why. Maybe just because my dad's in it, and I was like, oh, I don't know. Well, so far it's been a pleasure reading Cassidy's Run. I want to let you know tonight I'm just going to go to 7:30. Just need to rest my eyes a little bit. Got a little bit of eye strain, but that's not a big deal. So we're going to stop at 7:30 tonight, just in case anybody's keeping score. And with that, we'll get started. We left off on page 61 of Cassidy's Run, and we're in the chapter called Washington Game. And we've been talking about ricin, the poison RICIN, and the question arose, did ricin, the formula, somehow get secreted to the Soviets, and is that where they got it from? And there's a footnote here at the bottom of the page, which I'd like to read on that subject. Whether the information about ricin was passed to the Soviets either in the deception phase of Shocker or in a separate parallel counterintelligence operation is not clear. In 1985, Vitaly S. Yurchenko, a senior KGB official, told the CIA about Special Lab 100, a laboratory in Moscow where KGB scientists developed and tested poisons for operational use. The Russians may have thus extracted ricin on their own. And now back to the text. Early in 1967, as Cassidy recalls it, two unusual events occurred on one night when he met with Danilin at the bowling alley parking lot. When Cassidy picked up Danilin, a second man was with him. This was the only time there were two men, and there was no explanation of why a second person. Mike asked, "What did you put in the rock?" Cassidy briefed the GRU man on the latest batch of documents he had copied with his rollover camera. And then he briefed me on what they wanted me to look for, and the three of us got in my car, a blue Oldsmobile, and drove off to a residential area nearby. Mike motioned me to stop and to get out of the car, which was unusual, because normally only he got out of the car. The normal thing was, after a meeting, I would drop him off and I would stay in the car. So all three of us got out, near a streetlight. "Joe," Danilin said, "this is my friend Mike. He's a real good guy and he'll take care of you." Cassidy was startled by what happened next. Danilin gave me a bear hug and released me and held my head in both hands and kissed me on the cheek. and he said, "I'll never see you again." It was dark, but from the streetlight I could see tears welling up in his eyes and slowly making their way down his cheek. It was a very emotional scene, and I was truly taken aback by it. Unquote. To the FBI, Danilin's tears were further evidence that the GRU man completely trusted Wallflower. Danilin was parting sorrowfully from a revered and valuable agent, and if the Soviets believed in Cassidy, they might also believe in the bogus nerve gas formula he had given them. Chapter 8. And the Volga Turned White. The Soviet nerve gas program, the equivalent of Edgewood Arsenal, Dugway, and the other facilities in the United States, was run in secret laboratories in Moscow and in equally guarded test sites and production plants located along a 500-mile stretch of the Volga River. In Moscow, research and development was conducted at State Scientific Research Institute of Organic Chemistry and Technology at 23 Shasa Entudziatov, 4.5 miles due east of the Kremlin, not far from Imailovo Park, the site of the capital's popular flea market. There, scientists experimented with sarin, soman, and VX and sought to create newer and deadlier forms of new nerve gas as well. Some 350 miles to the east, the test sites and plants stretched almost in a straight line from north to south along the Volga River. In the north, in the Chuvash Republic, some of the formulas created in the labs in Moscow were produced in a plant in Novochebokhovsk. Oh boy, I butchered that one. Novocheboksarsk. There you go. A suburb of Cheboksary, the capital of the region. About 250 miles to the south, near the city of Volsk in the Saratov region, were two Shikani military sites where Soviet nerve gases were developed and tested. Finally, another 250 miles south in Volgograd was the Kirov Chemical Works, known as Chimprom, a major production site. Part of the facility was the Nazi nerve gas plant captured by the Soviet Army after World War II and brought back to Russia. The Moscow Research Institute also had a branch in Volgograd. In 1949, Boris Liebman, a 27-year-old Latvian-born physical chemist and chemical engineer, began work at the pilot plant in Volgograd, in the section where nerve gases were produced and tested in small amounts. At the Volgograd plant, Liebman's work soon caught the attention of his superiors, and by 1958, the year that Operation Shocker was created, he was named chief engineer. In 1960, he received the Lenin Prize for his work on both sarin and soman. The prize came with 10,000 rubles, a significant sum at the time. Volgograd began producing sarin, that is GB, in the pilot plant in 1949 and went into large-scale production in 1959. It also began turning out small amounts of soman, GD, in the late 50s. As the Soviet scientists attempted to divine what the United States was doing in its nerve gas research and production, some of the information filtering to Liebman and the officials at Volgograd had been gleaned by the espionage operations of the GRU. The intelligence data flowed into Volgograd from the Moscow Research Institute, which in turn received it from an arm of Soviet intelligence with the cover name of the Institute of Medical Statistics. Additional intelligence information was provided to Volgograd directly by the Chemical Intelligence Unit of the GRU. The unit passed along data about U.S. research on binary nerve gas weapons and about BZ, the incapacitant developed at Edgewood. More important, in 1972, Soviet intelligence learned the actual formula for VX, which had been invented by Britain and shared only with the scientists at Edgewood. Full-scale Soviet production of VX started in 1972 at Novochiboksk. A dozen years earlier, Soviet scientists had read in the openly available literature that the United States was gearing up to produce Soman, but the information was incorrect, although production had been under consideration. At Edgewood in the late 1950s, Benjamin Harris had in fact urged his bosses to commit to large-scale production of Soman. Harris, a chemical engineer, had served in the Army Chemical Corps during World War II. He had been an assistant professor at Johns Hopkins University when he began consulting at Edgewood on how to handle the sarin that had been captured from the Nazis. I went around to storage sites and advised people on handling the GB, how to open containers safely, unquote. In 1949, Harris left academe for full-time work at Edgewood. At that time, the scientists at Edgewood and Army officials were still debating which of the major nerve gases to choose for large-scale production. Harris did a study of Soman, GD. Quote, I came to the conclusion that its increased toxicity and other properties made it a more efficient chemical agent. There was, however, a problem. Unlike sarin, which is produced with ordinary alcohol, Soman relies on pinnacle, Pinacolyl, alcohol, a much more exotic substance. It was a lot more expensive to manufacture because it is much more complicated alcohol for which a plant would have to be built. There was no large-scale plant available in the U.S. at that time. But in Harris's view, the cost of producing the pinnacolyl alcohol was outweighed by the advantages. Quote, if one makes a cost-benefits analysis of the cost of delivery of a weapon to the target, the cost of the fill is an insignificant portion of the total. The cost of delivery is much higher. Quote, everybody knew that Soman was more toxic, and it is also more persistent because the heavier alcohol makes the gas more persistent. Among the gases, GD, Soman is in the middle. It lasts longer than GB, but is not as persistent as VX. You can make it more persistent by putting in a thickener. I urged them to make GD, Harris said. I made that recommendation to Cy Silver, Edgewood's technical director at the time. Quote, we didn't do it. They decided to make GB. It was decided at a high level. Saul Hormats recalled the decision. Soman was not used, he said, because I decided GB was better, more volatile. You get a fast cloud with it. You would have to make a new alcohol for Soman, and GB used normal alcohol, already available. You can't buy a big tank car load of pinnacolyl alcohol, but you can buy one of rubbing alcohol. But none of this was known to the Kirov Chemical Works in Volgograd. Large-scale production of sarin had begun at Volgograd in 1959, but the Russian scientists considered Soman the best nerve gas they had at the time. They had first learned of it when the Soviet Army captured the Spandau lab west of Berlin at the end of the war. Quote, at first the military establishment was against GD, said a former Soviet scientist. They were interested in VX. Then they changed their minds. If America had large-scale GD, we must have it. And so by 1960, the Russians had committed to large-scale production of Soman in the mistaken belief that the United States was following the same course. But they faced the identical problem of how to extract pinnacolyl alcohol. Although relatively simple to produce today, it is used in the manufacture of a number of herbicides and fungicides. At the time, pinnacolyl alcohol required 5 stages of electrolysis to produce. Work began on construction of a separate unit of the vast Volgograd complex to perform the electrolysis and began full-scale production of Soman. With the Lenin Prize and increasing responsibility for a Soviet nerve gas program, Boris Liebman's star was on the rise. Then, early in February 1965, a frightening event took place that was, for Liebman, a harbinger of personal disaster. A levee on the Volga was destroyed by melting snow. At the plant, there was near panic because Liebman and the other scientists feared that they might have contaminated a tidal pool behind the levee. If so, there was a real danger that tens of thousands of people in the lower regions of the Volga might be poisoned. Hurriedly, the scientists began testing the river as far as 12 miles downstream. To their immense relief, they found no traces of nerve gas. After a day and a half, the levee was repaired and the danger passed. For Liebman, however, the reprieve was short-lived. 4 months later, on June 15th, he looked out at the river and was horrified at what he saw. The Volga had turned white. That, as closer inspection revealed, was the visual effect of thousands of fish that had died and turned belly up. The immense fish kill extended for 50 miles down the river. The nerve gas plant was immediately suspected as the logical cause. Liebman, however, soon discovered what he believed to be the real source of the ecological disaster. The huge Volgograd hydroelectric power station had closed its gates, and the river was 12 feet lower than normal. As a result, the heat of the sun had made the water warmer. All the dead fish were sturgeon, which are more sensitive to high temperature than other fish. Liebman's protests were to no avail. As the chief engineer of the plant, a non-ethnic Russian and a Jew, he was an obvious target. Nor was it easy for Liebman to prove that pollution from the nerve gas plant had not somehow contributed to the fish kill. Liebman might also have been blamed because Moscow had begun a large-scale program of hydropower construction up and down the Volga. To admit that the power station had caused the fish kill might have brought that project to a halt. On March 9, 1966, Boris Liebman was convicted of negligence and sentenced to 2 years in a prison labor camp in nearby Volsky. At the time, he was 43 years old. He was stripped of his military medals and fined 10,000 new rubles, which was 10 times the value of his Lenin Prize, and the equivalent of 2 years' salary. 6 other officials at the chemical plant were convicted and fined, but not sent to prison. In an interview with the author in Moscow, 1993, Vil Mirzanyanov, a scientist who worked for years in the Soviet nerve gas program, blamed the fish kill on the chemical plant. Quote, Boris Liebman was chief engineer of the Volgograd plant in charge of soman production. Some of the soman toxins polluted the Volga, and the fish went belly up. Alexei Kosygin, then the prime minister, ordered someone be made an example, and Liebman became the scapegoat. In the prison camp, Liebman worked first as a foreman of a construction crew building houses. After some months, he was allowed to work in a chemical plant during the day, developing phosphoorganic stabilizers for rubber. To do so, he left the prison during the day, but had to be back inside by 10 p.m. Any later than that would be considered an escape, and 5 more years would be added to his sentence. Although sentenced to 2 years, Liebman was let out after 1 year because nobody else could start up production of soman at the Volgograd works. The soman production plant opened with Liebman back on the job in 1968. In 1972, Liebman was transferred to Novocheboksarsk to oversee the full-scale production of VX. The Soviets, however, were not content with mass production of soman, sarin, and VX. 2 scientists, Peter Petrovich Kirpichev and Vladimir Uglev, were working at Shikhani 1 on a new nerve gas, the like of which the world had never seen before. Whether the formula for GJ that was passed to Moscow in Operation Shocker inspired this Soviet effort may never be known without access to the closed archives of the GRU. But in 1973, Kirpichev and Uglev perfected the new substance, said to be 8 to 10 times more powerful than any nerve gas then in existence. Its name, which means newcomer in Russian, was Novichok. Well, I think I'll leave it there tonight. It's 21 minutes after 8, and I'm going to take it easy for the rest of the evening. My eyes are a little bit strained, and that's from looking at the computer all day. So forgive me, but I'm going to call it a night early tonight, and looking forward to tomorrow evening when I'll have Chris Fogarty with me, the author of The Perfect Holocaust, the 1845 to 1850 Ireland's Perfect Holocaust. So we'll see you tomorrow night at about 8 o'clock. See that we've got, there's our teaser for the Chris Fogarty show tomorrow night. I think the message here is tune into Screaming Ospreys, where you'll see my calendar, you'll see all of our archives and the book train and much more. So make sure and bookmark Screaming Ospreys so you'll always know what's going on here at McDuff Channel. McDuff Lives. And that'll be tomorrow night. There he is, Chris Fogarty, the author. See you guys then, and take care. Good night, everybody. And thanks again to Aaron Adler for your production service tonight and always.